professor at the University of least the New Mexico State Committee of the National Museum of Women of the Arts, who were our exhibition partner for New Worlds, and the curator of New Worlds, Nancy Zastudel here. This is our last couple of weeks of the show. It closes on the 28th this month. So if you haven't checked it out, feel free to after the program. And without any further ado, here is Szu-Han.
Such a lovely, friendly audience. Recognize everybody. Yay! So I'm Szu-Han, and I'm organizing this panel. So Nancy, the curator of this exhibition, nominated 5 artists from New Mexico for this New Mexico Women to Watch 2024. And I was very honored to be nominated. When Nancy approached me, you know, I had like this wrestling within my internal wrestling about the category, like the women to watch thing. So I had conversations with Nancy about it, and ideally, if we could change it to New Mexico women, non-binary, genderqueer, trans people to watch, that would be like awesome. But this is coming from like a DC thing, National Museum of Women in the Arts. I think it's a Smithsonian museum. So yeah, like there were things out of our hands, but that was kind of the seed of this panel tonight. So yeah, I'm Szu-Han. As JC mentioned, I teach at UNM, and I'm an artist, educator, activist, and this panel is produced by our collective from 36, and Bernardine Hernandez is here. Martin Wanam is currently in North Carolina, and Hazel Batres Chavez is traveling and is coming into town tonight, so can't make it. But the 4 of us, we work on prison abolition, police abolition, and art. And so we do that through direct action and education and different projects that come up. We also have a shipping container art gallery called Ni de Aquí, Ni de Allá. So you can check that out if you would like. You can submit to an open call. We show local artists and different projects. So yeah, I'm really excited about this panel tonight. I'm going to introduce our panelists with reading from bios. So first we have Lena. Lena is the Interim Director of Public Policy at the ACLU New Mexico, where she and the team work with coalitions advancing meaningful policies for New Mexican civil rights and liberties. Lena first joined the ACLU in 2022 as a policy advocate, focused primarily on bodily autonomy and healthcare access, after many years working in movement spaces on issues including queer organizing, activist safety, and human rights policy. Originally from Albuquerque, she holds a PhD from the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and can usually be found writing, making art, or hanging out with her wife, Michael, and their pack of goats. Lazarus Letcher, they, them, is a PhD candidate in American Studies at UNM, focusing on linking homophobia and transphobia to white supremacy culture and examining QT BIPOC art as resistance. Laz has written for Autostraddle, Them, and the occasional dry academic journal. They play viola in the leftist folk band Eileen and the In-Betweens. You can check them out. And for art installations, durational performances with the group Stages of Tectonic Blackness. And Stages of Tectonic Blackness work has been shown at the NMSU Art Museum, 516, the National Hispanic Cultural Center, and other museums across the US. And you can read more about their work at LazarusLetcher.com and on their Instagram handle. And you have a film screening at National Hispanic Cultural Center currently, right?
The Armory in LA.
At the Armory in LA about Blackdom, which is, I just learned, the first free Black city in the United States, and it's here in New Mexico. So, yeah. So Kayla Chingada is our third panelist. Kayla is Albuquerque's premier drag seductress. As a prominent member of Saints Ball, an alternative drag troupe, she hopes to inspire crowds to live fearlessly and authentically. Kayla is a published makeup artist that enjoys using her skills to empower people of all backgrounds, ages, and genders to unleash their inner beauty. So thank you all to our panelists. Let's give them a round. We're going to start with a music video that the Funturistics produced, and Kayla is featured in that music video, so we'll talk a little bit about that first, briefly, and then we'll jump into a discussion with our panelists.
The year is 2069. Large segments of the population have been rendered superfluous. The ruling classes use surveillance and policing to incarcerate and sterilize people en masse. Inmates forced to repair policing robots figure out how to hack the technology. They liberate themselves when the surveillance tools become devices for time travel.
Organized, made a jailbreak, here's a prize! We're free! 2069 here to free your mind. Cops everywhere trying to steal our shine. We came to the party, we turned the looks. We came to school, yeah, you better work. 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 You better work. 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 You better work. 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 You better work. Work, 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 work. You better work, 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 work. Time to make the crowd go up. Time to shut the streets down. This is not how I woke up, but it's how I get down. If you leave with me, we'll be on till morn. Resist therapy, and it just goes on.
Party till it wasn't cool. Running from myself, running out of breath. All up, serving up a hot mess.
I did my time. I think you were giving up nothing more time.
We all left out. I did my time. I think you were giving up my time.
Hello. Angela, Asada, gracefully, fruity, surfing all day, paving the way. Hey. Marcia, Sylvia, and every queen in history. The struggle is real. You know how I feel. Organize and raise a voice. Flip that if you got a choice. Creatures, I'm telling you, we got us now. So make some noise!
Work, 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 work. We're here! Time to make the crowd go up. Time to shut the streets down. This is not how I woke up, but it's how I get down. If you leave with me, we'll be on till morn. Resist therapy, and it just goes on. Time to make the crowd go up. Time to shut the streets down.
La Santa María. Y solo venían y nos matarían. For clothes and labor, don't need no savior. Open your eyes, decolonize. Over queer adventure, they attack us, we unite us. They are coming for our rights. Kick-ass queens will fight in tights. After the creative organ style, don't forget how to diet. After the creative organ style, don't forget how to riot. Came to destroy the PIC. Freedom is not what I see for black, brown, POC. Hello, y'all, what's the tea? Elon Musk going to Mars while we're here. Fight for programs, billions and billions. Blood of police, never enough for our needs.
Turn the music up, turn the clown around. Time to have a ball, time to throw it down. Glamour, knowledge, attitude, shade. Here to slay and rape all day. In it, to win it. No, I'm killing it, ignoring the haters. Are you feeling it? Are you feeling it? Feeling it? Are you feeling it?
Time to make the crowd go up. Time to shut the streets down. This is not how I woke up, but it's how I get down. If you leave with me, we'll be on till morn. Resist and repeat, and it just goes on.
That was a lot of fun to produce, a lot of work, but working with Saints Ball and some of the local queens has been awesome. Kayla, I don't know, do you want to say anything about what it was like to shoot the video and work on the project?
So, there we go. Is it working?
Can you guys
Yeah. See? There we go. There we go. So first and foremost, I do want to say thank you so much, Szu-Han, for the opportunity. You and the Fronteristics did an amazing job. Safety was at the forefront, absolutely. Szu-Han gave us some training because we knew that we were going to be out in public, hitting the streets. We had a whole section that was filmed right in front of the police station here downtown. And we were fully anticipating, hoping for the best, but knowing that it was a possibility that we're singing this song about police abolition and we're doing it right in front of the police station. So we knew that it could have happened that we may have been arrested for public disturbance, anything that they could come up with. But we had a lot of training on that and we were prepared for the worst. But I'm so happy to say that crowd reception was incredible. We had an amazing team behind us. We had plenty of people who were part of the Fronteristics that were brought on to protect us. And I'm just super grateful. It was such an incredible experience. And the Fronteristics giving an opportunity like this to everyone who was in the video. They're all black, brown, trans, non-binary, like everything under the umbrella. It was just such an inclusive space. We were made to feel at home, and it was challenging because we didn't know, it all ran super smoothly, but we didn't know what to expect. Being dressed like this and going out in public, it is an act of defiance. And what we were hoping to accomplish was, again, just inspiring people and letting them know that it's all right to be your authentic self and really standing firm in our queerness and supporting one another in the community.
thank you for bringing that up about the safety part of it. Yeah, I mean, I think because as a collective we've been in different situations and experienced different contexts for protests specifically, and we've drawn a lot from ACLU Know Your Rights materials for the trainings that we do. So we're really conscientious about trying to prepare everybody and have folks on hand that were like just de-escalating and watching out. And well, actually, when we started to film in front of the police station, we had the beat going and the queens were lip syncing, and then I saw some cops start to dance. And then I think then they started to hear the lyrics and stop dancing. So we can talk a little bit more. Also, we'll have a Q&A section about the video. But we did a lot of, there was just so many, it was such a collaborative effort. Tagle and Allison Saint did the garments, and we had different people come in and do choreography and the rehearsals, as well as the camera and all of the stuff, the production aspect of it. So yeah, maybe we can dive into discussion questions.
Feel free now.
Oh, I think there's a live stream happening, right? So we need to be on for you. Cool. Is this okay? Okay. Maybe Lena, you can start us off with kind of how are things going in New Mexico for queer organizing and activism and queer rights?
Thanks, Szu-Han. And thank you all for being here today. Really nice to see you all. And to my fellow panelists, I hope you can jump in as well if I'm missing anything. But just as a brief overview, working in the ACLU, we work on a lot of different policies in coalition with a lot of different incredible organizations. So I just want to shout out quickly Bold Futures, Reproductive Justice Organization, Equality New Mexico, who's one of the leading queer policy organizations in the state, Transgender Resource Center New Mexico, NM Native Votes, Coalition Against Homelessness, many, many more. And with this group of folks working in the policy space, looking at what we're seeing kind of as the current lay of the land and challenges that are coming up, we often talk about New Mexico being one of the most legally protected states for queer and trans people in the US, but that doesn't translate to rights actually being upheld, and it doesn't translate to access to healthcare, to spaces, to services. So while we do have really strong legal protections in New Mexico, and that's really thanks to hundreds of years of organizing, primarily by queer and trans people of color, to get New Mexico to a place where there's a ban on conversion therapy. We have a really strong Human Rights Act that bans discrimination based on gender, gender identity, sexuality, in all public accommodations, public spaces like schools. We have a constitutional recognition at the constitutional level that sex discrimination is prohibited. We have some really strong pieces of law that protect legal access to reproductive health care, including abortion care, protect gender affirming care. And so looking at legal protections, we're in a very strong place and often looked to in the rest of the country as being a really protected state. And at the same time, we have a healthcare crisis. There's a severe lack of access to care. We have elected officials who are very intent on continuing to criminalize poverty and increase those criminalizations on all sides of the political spectrum. And so we're facing a lot of challenges, both in New Mexico and then also federally, looking at continued efforts to restrict access to healthcare, restrict access to information in our schools, online, that are really important to queer and trans communities, and restrict access to spaces as well, community spaces, educational spaces. So that's kind of a broad overview of what we are talking about right now with our partners and what we're looking at.
Laz, do you want to just share a little bit about kind of, I don't know, anything in response to that?
Sure, yeah. I really love that New Mexico is considered a sanctuary state, and our numbers are definitely increasing. We have a lot of folks fleeing here, especially trans folks of color from Texas, from Florida, from Arizona, and that's putting a continued drain on the resources that we're already lacking. But I do welcome my siblings, like, come on over. And I think it's important to note, why is New Mexico a sanctuary state? And yes, it's these legislative protections, but the law isn't what saves us, community is. And we have such robust trans and queer community here. For a long time, Szu-Han did some of this work, my partner Faye did some of this work, but they moved all of the trans asylum seekers in the United States to rural New Mexico, kind of as an attempt to disappear them, but they didn't know that we're rowdy as hell, and that we don't let people, trample on our siblings' rights. And we were just kind of a loose coalition of like queer people and some churches, which was an interesting, kind of odd couple, but picking the girls up when they got released. Sometimes they'd be released on the outside of the fence, just in the desert in rural New Mexico. People that didn't speak English, trans folks of color, but we were too successful, and they lasted only a year here because we organized so effectively. But I think it's important to note that this land has always known more than two genders. So many of the tribes here, I want to note that we're on Tiwa-speaking lands, but so many of the tribes here have always known these genders beyond the white supremacist settler colonial gender binary. Like, yes, we need these legislative protections, but more importantly, we've always had this incredible community support that is just continuing to grow. But we would love more doctors. That would be very great.
Hear, hear. Kayla, do you want to say anything about the drag scene and being visible? Anything else that you want to add?
I would say that drag in itself has always been a form of protest, and it's always been very political. And I'm so grateful that we do live in a state where we have a lot of protections, but there are several states that are trying to have an overall ban on drag. They're trying to paint drag artists as people who are sexual deviants, and they are corrupting our children. And there are still people even in this state who share those beliefs. But hopefully by being visible, encouraging queer people to stand their ground and hitting the streets, we want to show that drag is an art form. We are fighting for acceptance. We're fighting for not only the right to be visible, but it does boil down to wanting to have people in every community feel welcomed, and drag has never known a specific gender. Drag is welcoming for everybody. I tell absolutely everyone, if you even have like a little itch you want to scratch and you've been thinking about doing drag, do it. It is so empowering. And I think by showing people that it's harmless, it's good fun, it is powerful, and it can be inspiring, that is just going to speak volumes and hopefully just open the doors for wider conversations on gender identity, sexual liberation, and body positivity. There are so many things that construct drag as an art form, and I just want the facets to be visible to everybody.
I guess this is kind of a question, I'm going a little bit off script, to Laz and Kayla specifically, if you've encountered, aggression, violence, or kind of, hostility, and how you've handled it here.
Yes. I've had a great time in New Mexico. I grew up in rural Indiana, which is an extremely character-building place to grow up when you're black and trans. I'm quite tough and full of corn, but I've mostly had a really great experience in New Mexico. Part of that is being a trans masculine person. We tend to fly under the radar. I don't get clocked in public that much. But yeah, I survived a murder attempt last summer, so I'll just cut to the chase. It was actually the night y'all were filming the music video. About half a mile from here, my neighbor fired an AK-47 at me 8 times. So I have faced violence. It's not being considered a hate crime, even though he said that one of the reasons behind the shooting was that he thought I was hiding children in my house. Given the current political climate, connecting a queer person to hiding children doesn't seem like a hop, skip, and a jump to a hate crime for me. But in truly American fashion, we found out that he would receive less time added to his sentence as a hate crime than he would for destruction of property. So that's the landscape of things here. I will say that one act of violence has been counterbalanced by such an incredible outpouring of community support. Even, the night of the shooting, like I jumped my back fence, I was able to get away, I was running down Lomas barefoot and bleeding, and was extremely cognizant that I am Black, I am barefoot, I am bleeding, and I need to ask someone for help. And the first people I asked, was like, I don't need to hold your phone. Because even in that moment, I had that, Du Boisian double consciousness of like, you think I'm probably trying to rob you. I just experienced the worst moment of my life. But I had one of my white trans friends drove by and saw me, surrounded by cop cars and was like, let me grab some more people and come back, because that's probably not good. So, within minutes of these shots being fired, I was surrounded by community. So this man, tried to end my life, tried to isolate me, and my community said, fuck that. And I'm not leaving New Mexico. I still love this place dearly. It still beats Indiana. But yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. I know that, a little bit off script, but I appreciate you sharing. And it's testament to the importance of community, like you were saying, that it's not all about just like legal protections on paper.
Yeah, I absolutely do think that community is one of the strongest things that we have here in New Mexico, and I'm so grateful to be in the presence of just so many POC and so many women, so many trans people, and I think once we are, for lack of better words, outcasted by society, that causes us to gravitate towards one another. And I think that because of my friends, my loved ones, and the people that are around me, I feel less scared walking down the street at night. And it's pretty rough out there. So I think not everybody has that community, and there are so many people who are afraid to step outside of their door every day. Even walking from the parking lot just around the corner to here, I had somebody shout at me out of their car, and I'm gonna tell myself that they were catcalling me because I look good, but I'm not sure what they said. But just for existing, there are so many people who do face violence, and all we want is to love one another, to be accepted, to welcome people with open arms, and just wanting to be accepting towards everybody. That causes some people to have a violent reaction. Some people are very ignorant still, and it can be exhausting to try to constantly find validation in the people around you. So I think one of the most important things that we could do is find ourselves as valid first. Show that it's important to lead by example and offer love to the people around you. Offer love to the people who are coming here seeking asylum. And for every person who's going to be threatening or physically violent towards you, there are so many people who are going to embrace you and love you and comfort you. And I think that we are definitely on the right path, but there's still so much work to be done.
Thank you. As a person?
I go back to what y'all are saying about community care, and about being with people we love, those who love us, and centering our time and energy in those spaces.
Thank you. We've touched on a little bit of this kind of here and there, but for you all, what are the most urgent challenges you encounter as a queer person living in New Mexico, and then in general for the community?
I'll go back to the medical thing. I will say UNM, it might still be, but it's one of the only medical schools that like actually covers trans healthcare in its curriculum, which is wild. We'd be existing for a very long time. But New Mexico, our trans population per capita is on par with New York. Like, we are one of the transest states in the nation. Go us, you know, doing the Lord's work every day. And it's just wild to me what I hear from doctors still when I walk in, like the lack of the education of folks who aren't younger or haven't gone to UNM to get this healthcare, and also just the length of getting an appointment. Even for cis people, like this, I'm looking out for y'all too. Like, it's so hard to find competent care here. I do appreciate Michelle Lujan Grisham put out like a full page ad, I think it was in Texas newspapers, being like, hey doctors, do you want to like practice somewhere where you can give full reproductive health care and not worry about losing your license? Like, come to New Mexico. Like, that's some great tourism ads, you know, for doctors, but especially as our numbers really continue to skyrocket, the trans and queer community, we need more competent medical care here, and we need more affordable care. Housing continues to be an issue. I know the TGRC just opened the first trans-free living space in New Mexico, and that's a huge benefit, but you know, we're a poor state. Those issues are just even more amplified for queer and trans people, especially queer and trans people of color.
Yeah, I absolutely do think that community resources are something that we could all invest in. And I think donating your time, donating funds, donating food to places like the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico, it is going to make waves in the community, because we have family out there who are hungry, who don't know where they're gonna sleep for the night. And I'm also very grateful for, excuse me. I'm also very grateful for the Teen Empower Center here on Central. They are one of the, excuse me, I'm so sorry. They are one of the sponsors for Saints Ball, which is a queer alternative drag troupe. And they offer community resources to younger folks. They offer sexual health classes. They offer contraception. They offer free HIV screenings towards everybody in the community, but they're primarily focused on the queer youth. And I think having a place for people who may not feel welcome at home or don't have any community around them, having a place like that is so important, because that may be the only place that they're able to find solitude. And I think we could all be able to contribute to some of the amazing organizations here in our community. And I really do think that even extending kindness to somebody you're passing by on the street can, again, speak volumes.
And in complete agreement, I think access to healthcare, access to housing, continuing to push back on all fronts against the continued attempts to increase criminalization of poverty, and working to protect access to information and community. I think there's, you know, a lot of folks are very isolated, and if you don't have safety in your home, in your school, in your closest knit community that maybe you're born into or growing up in, it's one thing if you're in Las Cruces or Albuquerque, and there's elsewhere to find that community, but we have a lot of really rural communities in our state, a lot of folks without access to internet, and so that can compound just the lack of being able to access community outside of the community that you're born into, and so really fighting to increase that access and protect the access to information and resources that already does exist.
Thanks. This is a follow-up to all of your answers, really. What would you tell people who identify as LGBTQ plus living in New Mexico, especially young people who are struggling with the attacks on the queer community in our current political moment? Anyone can start.
Yeah. I really appreciate your point about like access to internet, because that is something that is under attack, especially for LGBTQ youth. That's being considered something that the youth need to be shielded from. And I remember being, again, rural Indiana, on my dial-up internet, Googling, like, what is gay? And, like, what a lifeline that was. And, I've done a lot of work with LGBTQ youth. I used to work at a LGBTQ arts camp called Chords, which stood for Queer-Oriented Radical Days of Summer, which is a Fox News nightmare, but a very lovely camp. And it was really fascinating, being with other millennial and Gen X queer and trans people, and being, like, a little salty of like meeting trans kids who had access to hormone blockers, and like meeting a young trans masculine person who would never need top surgery because he would never grow breast tissue. And it just like blew my mind, and we'd be loving with them, and then the counselors would get together and be like, it must be nice, must be so nice. Like, these kids these days, how good they have it. But the flip side of this visibility is attacks that I can't even imagine. I was a little closeted gay kid in Indiana. I had to handle these slurs, but I didn't have to show up to the state house arguing for my right to exist. Like, I am constantly blown away by the strength and resiliency of our youth. And they shouldn't have to be strong. That's such bullshit. They should be able to be kids. And so that's where we need to step up, showing up to school board meetings, showing up when Moms Against Liberty is attacking these youth, because kids have the right to be kids, right? The kids aren't going to school and getting gender-affirming care. I fucking wish I would be at a middle school today getting my hormones for free if I could. I would tell them to hold on and that they're not alone. And I just realized this year, I was looking at my partner, we're both trans, T for T forever, and we're both going gray. And I never thought I would go gray, let alone with someone else. And you can and will grow old, and you can and will grow old with someone that loves you and sees you for who you are. And just please stay.
That was powerful. I'm from Espanola, New Mexico. It's a very small town up north. And I'm actually super grateful to have been part of a pilot program that I'm sure is still there. There was an El Centro Family Health Clinic, and they wanted to have peer education in our classrooms. So I was one of the only queer representatives that was able to go into our freshman health class and give people not only sex education, but queer sex education. Because there are so many kids whose only resource is the internet. And if we are restricting them of that, then they may have questions that go unanswered until they do have their first sexual experience. And I think that educating the youth is so important, not only in terms of their reproductive health and how their bodies are going to change as they're maturing, but something that goes largely untouched is gender identity. And once we answer all of these questions, it's going to be easier for not only our youth, but for grown adults to have a better understanding of themselves and the roles that they'll play in the community. And I do think it's important to advocate for more education, more queer visibility. And I would also tell our youth to just stand your ground, be secure in who you are, love yourself, love others, and it's way easier said than done, but everybody is on the path towards accepting themselves, and that looks different to everybody. But as long as we continue having these open conversations, and especially existing as like queer, trans, non-binary people, day to day we have to answer questions, or we choose not to answer these questions because it can be mentally taxing. But even people looking at you up and down as you're walking in the street and asking, what are you? A lot of the times it is from an ignorant standpoint, but some people may have never had experience with somebody that was openly trans, openly queer. So I think having conversations with those who are willing to listen is going to set up our communities for success.
What you said, Laz, about seeing gray hairs appear and the joy in that, that really resonates. And my wife who's sitting there and I, when we find gray hairs on each other, it's a really joyful thing when it's something that you didn't necessarily imagine growing up, that you would be able to live this life and to live to this age and to see gray hairs appear in a loving relationship. And so I think it's sharing that joy, being really loud about that joy, being visible for young people feels incredibly important, and sharing, you know, how important they are, how essential they are, and encouraging them to find their own joy, whatever that looks like. That might be found in queer community if they have access to queer community. It might be found in rock hounding. It might be found in looking for lizards. It might be found in, you know, a trusted adult in their community that they connect with. It might be found in a lot of different ways. But encouraging young people to seek out whatever joy looks for them and support them in that process. And I think what y'all are saying as well, just stepping up, I think it's on adults, it's on those of us who are in positions in community and organizations to step up and to be visible and to make sure we're in those spaces so that those young people can find adults that they can talk to.
What's your vision for the world you want to live in here in New Mexico and beyond? And then how do you see the work you do fit into that vision?
I'll start on this one so we can I think my vision is that everybody can have that everyone can experience that joy, that of growing older, of experiencing getting wrinkles, gray hair, in loving relationships and community, supported, thriving, in whatever joy looks like for them. And I think that, as Laz was talking about, you know, and Kayla as well, policy, working in a policy space, we know that policy, law, these are not spaces or tools that are going to save us. And so I think it's viewing the work that I'm currently engaged in as a harm reduction tool and as a tool for opening spaces. If we can have a win that either stops a bad law from going through that would be really harmful to our communities, or gets a law in place, like the ban on conversion therapy, the legal protections for accessing gender-affirming care and reproductive health care, that can then open space up for other ways of existing and being on a day-to-day basis, because all the energy isn't going into that battle. I see that as kind of the strategy behind the policy work that we're doing right now.
I think continuing to vote in your local elections and continuing to vote in elections that are going to affect the entire nation is one of the most powerful things that we could be able to do, because we do want to, again, set our future up for success. We want our children and our youth to be able to have a longer life expectancy for queer, trans, brown youth. And I really think that ensuring that we're going to set policies in place that are going to give them even more protection, and hopefully it will cause a shockwave that will affect other states throughout the nation. But I really think that showing up and protesting is another very important thing to not only our community, but again, on a global scale, not even just nationwide. Using our voice to protest and stand up for what we believe in is something that is so powerful, and we really have to continue to, again, vote for not only ourselves, but there are so many undocumented people here in our community that don't have that same liberty, and we want their voices to be heard as well. And I really just think that, again, visibility is so important, and if you have a strong community around you, reinforce those ties and welcome others with open arms as well.
I really struggle with thinking about the future, but I think about the past a lot as a historian. And one concept from West Africa that's kind of my North Star is the concept of Sankofa. I'm the first person in my family to go back to West Africa since enslavement, and it's this symbol of a bird placing an egg on her back. And it's about looking to the past to prepare for the future. In so many of our societies and our cultures, especially people of color, trans and queer people have always been, I'll just end it there. We've existed, we have been honored, we've been revered, we've been spiritual leaders. So my dream for the future is getting back to our roots and doing this decolonizing work, even for white folks too, finding the ways that the projects of white supremacy and settler colonialism have taken you away from your ancestors, have taken you away from what your ancestors believed, and finding our strength in our ancestors. I mean, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There have been so many liberation projects that have been successful for me to sit here today. Like, I think about that every time I go to vote. I'm like, how many amendments and laws are in place for my black trans ass to be in here right now? So finding that strength from our ancestors and like divesting ourselves from these systems that intentionally keep us separated. There are so many commonalities in our cultures if we get past the bullshit. There's a really incredible book I encourage folks to check out. It's called Before We Were Trans. And it's this very amazing survey throughout history of all of these cultures around the world, across time and space, that honored and revered us. And I use these names as a placeholder, for the names and titles that colonization has ripped away from us. But I know that my ancestors love me. I've gone to the door of no return, where my ancestors took their last steps on African soil. I felt them there with me. I know I was there for a reason. And reconnecting with what they believed, I think is how we're gonna get through to the future. So I encourage everyone, do some investigating. Go down a rabbit hole on Ancestry.com. It's really addictive. Find out what your ancestors believed, find out who you are to them. And I think that's our path to a future that's a little less shitty than what we're mired in right now.
I really love that. I'm somebody that identifies with that too, the historian. I have the privilege of working with young people, college-age people, and grad students, and just people interested in learning on a day-to-day basis, and it's really inspiring. And I think what you all are saying about visibility, it's so important. I think, as a feminine presenting, bi person, that I'm a very private person also, so I don't love being out on social media. I don't love videos existing on the internet of me. But I think through the artwork and through the protests and through the Fronteristas Collective, all of those ways that we use our voice and do it in different ways, I love, that's why I love bringing this conversation together about policy, about kind of on the boots on the ground work. It's really important, so thank you all for sharing your thoughts. Maybe we can take questions from the audience. So you can just shout it out, or we can pass a mic.
Jeez, we're all really shy.
Yeah, do you want a mic?
Sure. Thanks so much. So I wanted to ask a question because I recently started teaching at a high school, and actually I work 2 doors down from here at Sierra Leadership High School. And there's a very small number of trans and queer students, at least openly trans and queer students at the school. But from interacting with them so far, I've noticed an interesting amount of political apathy. They don't seem to care, or maybe they don't think that they actually can make any difference or any change in sort of what's happening around them. And so I was just going to ask if anyone had any thoughts about maybe ways to kind of go about breaking up that apathy and like showing kids that they can be effective like change makers, you know? Because I think that's so important, like you guys were saying.
I think that again, tying it back to my roots in Española and the pilot program that we had done, there were so many people that kind of sat and their eyes glazed over, and they're like, why should I care about this? And so much of the youth and so many people even don't think that it's important to care about what's going on around them until it affects them directly. And I think asking questions that will cause them to have some more internal introspection will really get like the gears going. Asking, how do you think that this might affect you in the future, 10, 20 years down the line? How is this even affecting you right now? Have you ever felt unsafe walking down the street? Have you ever been afraid to talk to your parents about what's going on in your mind or what's going on at school? And I think especially like queer kids, I've lived through it. There are times where I feel like I don't have any support around me. And I'm never gonna forget like the first queer person that I interacted with, or seeing a queer person in an elevated teaching role, knowing that even if we may not have walked the same path, there are so many things that connect us. And I think even giving testimonials and talking about your experience with your students can really resonate with them, even if they're not queer, even if they're cis, no matter what the background is. As long as you're sharing a part of your story, there will be some takeaways from that.
Yeah, I love that question. I think something too is just like getting folks to understand how interwoven all of our oppression and liberation is. Like just because this is happening to a group that you're not a part of doesn't mean you're not next. And it can be a little dark to help them connect the dots. Something that I really loved as a kid was like learning about child activists. Like I was obsessed with Ruby Bridges as a child. And she's not that old, like all those pictures are in black and white, but she's on Instagram. Like that is not long ago ancient history. Or like the Children's Crusades during the Civil Rights Movement where the jail cells were like filled with kids. Like that shit got me riled up. I was out on the playground being like, let's mess things up. I think the Howard Zinn Education Project has some resources that like are broken up in each specific ways to get youths involved in, you know, civil rights issues, social justice. Also like drawing from Project 2025 and being like, hey y'all, this is bleak. What are some ways this might impact you? And I know you can't be super partisan in a high school, but again, just like, yeah, I'm a history nerd, like learning these stories of how kids have impacted change. Like I remember, you know, I can't vote, what can I do? And it's like, so much. My lawyer sister told me I had to stop telling the youth that I worked with to commit arson, that I could be potentially legally liable, but sometimes you get mad that you want to light stuff on fire, and I don't tell them to do that. But like, spiritually.
One of the things that we do is workshops in schools, and one of the most like engaging tools we've found in those workshops has been kind of along those lines where we do scenarios based on court cases and like big decisions that came out of those court cases that impact all of our rights that were started by student activists, and then talk about, we walk through the scenario of like a group of students did this, their school got pissed off and said they couldn't do it anymore, somebody was expelled, something else happened, they sued, and then like what do you think the decision was? Who do you think was right? Was the principal right for saying they couldn't start a GSA? Were the students right? And talking through it, and I think that definitely makes it a bit more, like being able to kind of see themselves in those roles potentially, or how actions they could take could have broader implications. And just like, you know, sometimes I feel like with young people, they're interested in what they're interested in. They're not going to be interested in everything, but making sure the whole like wealth of information and opportunities is out there and available for them. We also host a Youth Day of Action up at the Roundhouse every year with a bunch of partner organizations, and we'll have just like, we won't tell them what to advocate on, we'll just have a whole compilation of all of the youth relevant legislation, which is everything. So we have to distill it down. Everything affects young people and all of their intersectionalities, all of our intersectionalities. But we do a selection with a bunch of partner groups and organizations, and then just hand over the materials to them. And if any of the things speak to them, whether it's sex ed in school or consent education in school, that was one last year, from access to housing, a book ban bill, like whatever it is, just having the options out, and then they can just take that and go talk to their legislators about whatever it is they are interested in, and just, you know, seeing what bites, and then sometimes that grows into something more, and sometimes they find their joy elsewhere, which is fine.
Youth to this event and sent the event out to so many networks of teachers. Don't know if that was successful, but I'm open to suggestions on that one. But I was gonna say that this is why I love art making, is because I think just a really simple act of making something in the classroom can change your sense of agency, and at least that was my experience. So yeah, I think that like, I can't speak because I don't have kids or somebody immediately around me like who's like a preteen, but I think that there's so much information out there, and you know, it's like, I can imagine that people are overwhelmed and also apathetic, maybe because there's just like, I'm just shutting down because there's too much going on, and what can I even do about any of it? And like this, maybe that's where some of the apathy is coming from. So yeah, I mean, that's the motivation for doing things like this music video, like doing something that would be political and protesty, but fun and like in your face. So yeah, that work continues. Open to any other audience thoughts on that too, unless there's another question.
I work with elementary school kids, and it definitely is that they're just like, there's too much going on, and I hate all of it. A lot of them would tell me that they just have no concept of what a future will look like because everyone talks about the world ending so much around them. It was really depressing.
Yeah. Wow, and that's elementary school.
Yeah. Yeah, like as young as like second grade.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really hard, and I had to be like, you're so small, you have so much time, it could change, it's gonna be okay, don't listen to the news, like, go outside and play with your friends and try not to think about that, I guess. Like, it was hard even to just know what to say to that. So.
Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine growing up in an environment where you have to feel like responsible on a global scale for things. Right. Yeah, shit's always been kind of fucked up, but there's a different level to maybe just the amount of information we're getting and the immediacy of crisis.
Well, and I work with high school students, and I'd like to counter some of that because I think some of the youth I've been working with are very empathetic and more community-oriented than when I was a kid, absolutely, for sure. And really, you know, that's the one positive thing I can see in 20 years of being chased down the street, being called names. Like, move that forward. I think largely a lot of youth don't find that acceptable. I think that, yeah, and I think they're listening more than you think, and looking for tools. So.
Yeah, I will add that working with my students is the most inspiring and optimistic place that I can be. Other questions? Everyone's thinking about the apocalypse. Do y'all have any questions?
If anything, I would just like to extend gratitude. We all have voices, y'all listen to us, and I really do appreciate all of your time, all the panelists' time, to all of the organizers for this event. This was really an enlightening experience. There's so much education around me, and I dropped out of college. I don't have any official training whatsoever. I do art for the love of it, and I did walk into this with almost like imposter syndrome, but again, it's just seeing all of the ways that we're so similar instead of so different. It's really empowering, and I am very grateful for everyone in this room.
Thank you. And I can say that you are the most fabulous looking, so you do not have to worry about imposter syndrome. Any other questions?
I want to ask a question.
Yes, thank you.
I don't need a microphone though. I was going to pretend to sing to her, but I won't. When you were shooting the music video, did you get permits? Or
No.
was this a non-permitted event?
It was
The
a
whole time
non-
I'm watching it, I'm wondering what you did with the people and what you did to get the permits and how you
No
wrote them.
permits. Yeah, I mean, that, I don't know if we ever, I'm sure we considered it at some point, but I think I've produced events downtown that were permitted, and I knew the process, and I was like, this is gonna be like 7 minutes in one place, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, like, we'll just do it and run. So, yeah, that was a risk we took. But, yeah, the crowd downtown, it was a weekend and the streets were shut off anyway. And I think, like, just the number of people around that were really supportive. We also, like, planted people. Like, we had friends and supporters come out to kind of be there and help out if anything went down. Yeah. No permits, though.
Good job.
Yeah.
I have a question. Yeah, I have a question about queer culture. Hopefully you can help enlighten me a little bit. So, you talk a lot about visibility and looking to ancestry, for strength and for resilience, I guess. And we talk a lot about youth and what we're leaving to them and what we wish for them. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, what parts of queer culture would you like to see amplified, and what parts of queer culture would be okay leaving by the wayside? That's a hard question, I know.
Bernadine, do you have an answer?
Yeah, you want to answer? The microphone.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to leave behind is infighting. Like, there's a few organizations that are like LGB without the T, and it's like, honey, we started this. There's a really incredible book. I have like a book list if people want it, because I know I cite a lot of sources, and syllabi are my love language. There's an incredible book by the Black queer scholar Roderick Ferguson called The One-Dimensional Queer that describes the intentional separating of trans people of color from the wider LGBT movement and how that set us back decades. So I would like to leave that behind. That's a trap to separate us. What I want to see continue, people being able to like recognize themselves younger and younger. Like, that is so sweet. Like, I knew who I was when I was 2, but the only trans representation I had was Jerry Springer. which was not like very uplifting, not very positive. So I'd love to see that continue. I feel like a lot of the youth that I interact with today are able to connect the dots between like homophobia and transphobia to white supremacy and to these larger structures. And like, I think the statistic is like 1 in 4 Gen Z kids is some flavor of queer or trans, which is amazing. And like, you know, not putting up with any more bullshit. So I'd love to see that continue.
In terms of what I would like to see left behind is, the division in the community. I feel like growing up queer, we're so used to the people around us not being so nice and so welcoming. And as we grow older, a lot of that can slowly translate into being exclusive and having gay men-only spaces that are exclusive of trans men or people who are trans-masked but not necessarily a man. And I feel like exclusion just divides us even further, and we're already so far removed from like the cis heteronormative that people just find it easier to be catty and be defensive instead of building bridges. And I definitely think that's something that we need more of in our community as a whole. And something that I would like to continue being amplified is self-acceptance. A lot of the time we're raised just to look a certain way, to fit a certain mold that our parents and the adults around us have presented us with. And I think that even just looking a certain way can be very liberating. Seeing these young kids as young as like preteen age, like with bright colored hair or wearing nail polish, and just having parents and community around them that really encourage authenticity, it's so powerful. I work in a makeup store as my day job, and I cannot tell you the amount of kids who have come up to me and just said like, wow, I like your makeup, or oh, I love your hair. And maybe they don't feel free enough yet to experiment with the way that they're presenting themselves to the world. Or when your outfits are being laid out for you by mom and dad, you don't have that much creative expression. But I do definitely think that, again, having these open conversations is going to encourage youth to be more of themselves at earlier ages, and I think that's just so important, so powerful. Love all the little queer babies running around.
Yes, I feel like the next Front 36 event should be at a makeup store. So yeah, the infighting thing, I was gonna piggyback off of that because I think it's not just queer culture, but like left culture. And so like it's so much harder to actually like resolve conflict and collaborate than it is to like critique and tear down and divide and be like, no, you're not X enough, right? So that's something that we, in our like kind of self-education about prison abolition, have to think about a lot, because it's like, okay, if we envision a world without prisons, without policing, what does that actually look like, and what are we building now for that future? It's a really hard, complicated, messy question, right? But I think even just in our day-to-day interactions with our people, like our friends, our community, our family, like how can we actually practice and rehearse that kind of world where we can resolve conflicts, where we can, put aside differences to work together, where we're not just tearing each other down and dividing our groups, because we're already like small enough, right? So we really need to build solidarity, and that's the work. Sometimes it's the hardest with your friends. Mm-hmm. Any last question?
bringing it back to like working with dominant society, like people who, like I think a lot of the infighting, it's very complicated. I agree, I see it a lot, and I think a lot of that is because there's a lot of it is a struggle for power in a very disempowered communities. But when engaging with the communities that do have power, whether it's heteronormativity, power, political, I think that in addition to ignorance and misinformation, the other thing that continues that division is the other. Like, continue to see us so other than me to the point where they're not even see us human anymore. So how do we within queer and trans community engage, educate, invite beyond like political work or activism, or as a form of that, through art, through just showing up as ourselves? How do we find those, like, oh, we're actually much more similar than we think? Because I feel like the most effective moments I've had with people who are being very resistant or just like full of disinformation about me was when they saw me as, oh, you're actually just human. You're just a person. And it seems so basic, but it's like transcendental for some of these folks. So yeah, I was curious, like, how would you say, like, that working with that?
Yeah, I know we've done a lot of similar work of doing like a lot of trans 101s in public, and it's very fascinating watching people's kind of perception change before your eyes. And I've thrown like as many statistics as I can, and you know, like we exist here, the challenges we face, and it really comes down to our stories, and they're just like, oh, you're just a human who has a pretty boring life. But it's also, I wish it weren't on us, and I don't think it is. Like I think that's a place where cis allies can step up a lot when you hear people spreading misinformation about trans people, which is rampant this election cycle, because it is so soul-sucking to constantly argue with someone about your right to exist. And there's a James Baldwin quote, I wish I could quote it perfectly, but it was like, I'm willing to argue with you about anything besides my humanity. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Like I used to get in fights with people on the internet all the time, being like, no, here's all of this stuff, and just recognizing like, where is this a conversation where I can actually move the needle, and where are you just being an asshole? Because at the end of the day, I need to protect myself and my spirit. And I think part of this too is the double-edged sword of visibility. Another book recommendation, Miss Major, incredible Black trans elder. She was at the Stonewall Rebellion. She's friends with Angela Davis, does a lot of incredible work around prison abolition. But her insights of what she's seen in her 80 years of like Black and queer visibility, and how that's like, you know, moved the needle some, and how that's been a literal double-edged sword. You know, in 2014, Laverne Cox was on the cover of Time magazine. It was declared the trans tipping point. Every year since then has been the deadliest year on record for Black trans women. So what does it mean that our stories are so visible, that our faces are so visible, yet the violence against us continues? I still believe our stories are our strength, but I don't know how to make people listen. So it's like a half answer with a great book recommendation, but.
Yeah, I think about, I mean, I was watching the debate, right, and so I had to turn it off because it was so upsetting, and I, like, the demonization, the racism, like the scapegoating immigrants, that was just throughout the whole debate, and I often challenge myself to think like, because I know people that are Trump supporters, I have friends and people in my circles, and not here, but in Lubbock, Texas, where I grew up. Probably as bad as Indiana, I would say. Yeah. But yeah, like, what would I say to them, and how would I speak to them, and I'm really grappling with that. Like, how do we actually have a vocabulary that can be shared, or that can be, that can cut through all of the BS. I don't know the answer. I'm with you. I want to know. but yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, maybe art is a space, or storytelling, or just getting to like, here's my human experience. Yeah, period.
So I just want to piggyback off of what everyone has shared so far. And I think it's so important to recognize that there is strength in numbers. So maybe on a smaller scale, you just talk to the immediate people around you and try to build connection in a way that may have not existed before, opening their eyes to your experience as a person. And making small ripples in that way can ultimately result in entire communities coming together to see change from their elected officials and anything like that. Even myself, again, tying it back to work, because in a makeup store, there is plenty of queer and trans people that are around me every single day. And I even just went up to my managers and I was like, we are lacking so much in terms of inclusivity. Here's how we can make this place more inviting for not only the people who work here, but for people who are just walking in to grab their mascara. There is just ways that we could even use more inclusive language in our day-to-day life instead of making everything so rigid. And I think once you're building more strength in the relationships around you and inviting people to almost follow your example by leading with just pride in who you are and using more inclusive language, being more welcoming and being non-discriminatory when you're dealing with people, even just at the store. Something as simple as being kind to your clerk who's ringing up your groceries. It's going to affect not only the way that they're feeling, but the way that they're going to treat the people that they interact with after you. So I think bonding together with your immediate circle is going to be the best way to result in change on a larger scale.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off your piggyback real quick. We're just playing hopscotch now. But yeah, like with my dad, I use as an example a lot. Like a lot of folks are like, oh, you can't talk about the trans with the old folks because you're gonna break them. And I think we should give them some grace that people can grow at any age. Like my dad didn't have an initial great reaction when I came out as trans, and this was over a decade ago. There still was not the same amount of information. And starting and having a deep relationship with this person that I love a lot, being able to ask follow-up questions and recognizing that a lot of his reaction was rooted in fear. Like he was very scared about me starting testosterone, and I was like, okay, but why? And it was because he was scared about me walking through the world looking like a black man, and then also he was like, because it was still very new. He's like, you don't know what they're putting in the vials. And I'm like, okay, you have generations of fear of the medical industrial complex. So figuring out like what was undergirding those emotions helped a lot. And he's grown tremendously. He's the court-appointed special advocate for all the trans foster kids in my home county now. Like he's gone from like, what is this to like, oh, I was talking to a young gentleman on the trans masculine spectrum the other day. And like, people having faith in the capacity for people to change, and especially like those close interactions. And it might seem like, well, I just changed one person's mind, but they're gonna turn around and interrupt someone when they're getting misgendered. And that person's gonna learn a lesson, and just recognizing like, yes, we can do things at this large legislative scale, but we can have such deep impact in our communities. Like Alicia Garza, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, calls it bubble up liberation. Because for so long we've focused on trickle down of like, well, when the men have their rights, then we'll get to the woman folk, and then the other folks will get to you eventually. But bubble up liberation, when we focus on those that are the most impacted, that are the most harmed, if we focus on creating a world that's safe for them, then we've created a world that's safe for everybody. Because liberation's not pie, right? It doesn't run out. But yeah, focusing on those bubbling up and those ripples out.
I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you to the 136 Collective for helping organize this. There are 136 zines for sale up at the front, as well as some ACLU Mexico material. So please go take a look at that and feel free to be bold with it. Thank you.
I'll also add, I think Lena said that you didn't have the LGBTQ specific Know Your Rights stuff, but it's available online.
Yeah, so we have it on our website, and we also have one of the stack of stickers over there is just a QR code that says, learn more about your rights or something like that. And if you scan that QR code, it takes you to our main Know Your Rights webpage that has all of our Know Your Rights sections broken out, including all of our our LGBTQ+, student privacy, all of that good stuff.
Awesome, and one more announcement. Roberto has an announcement to make.
Okay. Well, speaking of queer representation, especially in film, we put on the Way Out West Film Fest, which is celebrating its 22nd annual year, 10 days of queer films at the Guild Cinema in Nob Hill, starting October 11th through the 20th. So we just locked our program a week ago, so we have close to 70 films throughout the 10 days, and you can find out more information about that at wayoutwestfilmfest.com. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.